So here's a view of the belt drive system from inside the car. To diagnose your water pump properly, you may or may not have needed to already remove the belt. You can see pretty obviously where it goes. If you're curious how to access and remove the belt, check out our other video on how to do that. But as far as right now, here's a view of the pump. You can see the pump pulley. In our case, you can hear that wobble. That is not what it's supposed to sound like. So this is a view from inside the car. This isn't your general removal view, although you can do a great job of accessing some of the hard to reach bolts from this direction. This is a very simple list of some of the tools you'll need. You got a standard 3/8 inch ratchet, an extension. This is the important part right here. The swivel socket. You'll see why this is important in a moment. A short 10 millimeter. A longer 10 millimeter. This is actually optional if you have the extension. I like to use it. But again, this is all you actually need to pull off the water pump. When you're under the car, it's going to look way more difficult. That's why we took a video with the engine out of the car, which you probably won't see too many other places, but because we part out a lot of cars, we've always got an engine handy, so we're going to show you how it looks out of the car. So when you're underneath, you've got dim lighting and not the best view, you'll know exactly how to get out each bolt. Because when you're under the car, it might look like you need to remove a lot more pieces than you actually do. This exciting view right here is from underneath the car. Now, you get a much better view of what you're looking at from with the engine outside the car and then from on top. But this is the way a lot of you guys will be looking at it for a good portion of this job. Shouldn't take too long. So the main things to see right here, this is the one hose that we need to remove. Again, that's the only one we need to do. This has a worm style clamp on it with a little 6, 7, 8 millimeter bolt. That's because I previously replaced the constant tension spring clamp with this because I had it laying around. Usually from the factory, this will have the spring clamp on there, so be sure to use your spring clamp removal tool, especially if you're working on your back. If one of those things goes flying off, you don't want to hit you in the eye. So also, we can see the drain plug right here. This takes a 5 millimeter hex socket, or you can use a driver as well. Just make sure if you're using a impact, you get it seated in there pretty well. So as soon as you pop that out, be sure to have a container handy. I like these you can see right here. I know they ship these to restaurants with various items in there, but they're nice and flat and short, so they're super easy to swap out when you've got your coolant draining. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and pop this off and get the coolant out, and then we can get to changing the pump. When you pull the drain plug out, it should drain nice and slowly like this, as long as you haven't pulled the radiator cap out from the trunk. So this is the way I recommend doing it. It doesn't splash all over you. Now you can either have a friend, fellow shop worker, or other assistant go ahead and pull that cap, and this little trickle will turn into a gush. But if you use the drain plug method as opposed to just pulling off the hose, a lot easier to save your coolant. If, like on this car, it just got changed recently, you can go ahead and reuse that as long as everything looks good. Here are the difficult bolts to get to. You see this one? We're looking at this, here's the main pulley. So this is near the engine mount. We've got one 10 millimeter bolt here. We've got another 10 millimeter bolt here. It's hard to see, even zoomed in. That's actually one that's real easy to miss. So that's important. And then we've got one more that you'll see better from the car. You can see right here, it's underneath. And then after that, these guys right here, a little bit more obvious. So the swivel socket is going to be necessary, and you want to go with the short 10 millimeter. So you can see right here. We go ahead and pop this on here. This one's a little bit more obvious. So we're going to top that off. Okay, this is the hardest to get to part right here. It looks like you might need to remove some of the mount or some other pieces, but it's important to know that you don't need to. All you need to do is get a nice swivel in there like so, little extension, 10 millimeter, knock it out. The others are going to be done just like that. Right here, this hose you're going to need to remove because you're going to be removing the pump anyways. This has one of those pesky spring clamps. You definitely want to use the spring clamp removal tool, make that a lot safer and easier, especially since there's going to be fluid coming out of that hose anyways, and it's probably going to be crusty. So get that spring clamp removal tool, pull that off, and like I said, you've got one more hard to reach bolt under there, and the rest of these guys you can see here are nice and easy, all 10 millimeters, and we'll just show you what happens when we get all those off. Okay, so this is muy importante, guys. There should be a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bolts. This is important. Here you can see where the water pump was and where the bolts are that secure it. This guy right here at the very bottom of one of the outlets and right here are hard to see. Neither of these are actually particularly hard to get to. The hard ones will be the bolts right here and possibly there. Those are the ones I already showed you, the swivel socket. But it's just important that you straight up count all the bolts and make sure you've got all of them. Otherwise, you may end up prying the bolt. And I've done this before, guys. Trust me, it's ugly. Just make sure you've got all the bolts out, and when you do, the pump should just pretty much easily fall out. See this great little nautilus shape? This pump right here is really does not want to turn, as you can see. Maybe you can't. Trust me, it's tough. So one of the reasons why this is so important is the M96 series. That's this guy right here. Being Porsche's first water-cooled flat six, they had a few issues. Overall, it's a great engine, sounds great, drives great. A lot of the important stuff that manufacturers mess up on, they got straight, but few things are a little iffy. These water pumps cause a lot of issues. You won't find this on internet forums, but trust me, I've parted out quite a few cars based solely on the fact that the water pump went out and the owner didn't notice. I've seen these shafts actually break off. One car I ended up with, it had the water pump on it with no pulley. This one is seized up, as you just saw, could barely move. So when you change yours, it's important to do everything right. Make sure you get it. You can see here the gasket. Your pump should come with a replacement gasket. It's important to make sure this is replaced. You don't need to use any sort of form-in-place gasket, Permatex, etc. All you need is the factory gasket or whatever gasket comes with your kit, but don't reuse the same one that's been pressed in. This is a press-to-fit gasket, and as you can see from this one, it does kind of adhere to the pump itself. So there you go. This is what it'll look like when you're under the car. It'll make it that much easier. The water pump removed, obviously. You can see where the gasket's going to return to. What I do for the gasket sealing surface is use a Scotch-Brite pad, or you can use the green side of the yellow and green kitchen sponge if you've got one. Just don't bring it back into the house so your wife doesn't get angry with you. I've accidentally done that before, not thinking about it. So you can also see a hole for this manifold mount connector down here. I'll go ahead and point it out. This is one of the bolts right where my finger is pointing that you don't have to actually remove to remove the pump. It's going to be a little bit shorter than the rest. I feel like it makes it a little bit easier. Just make sure you go ahead and get it back in there. You could put it back in now. Like I said, I like to take it out because it's That way it's not in the way when you're getting to this super hard to reach section where the bolt goes right there, like I showed you, that you could see better with the engine out of the car. So now that this sealing surface is cleaned up, we're ready to pop on the gasket and put the new pump in. As long as you've got the engine access cover open, I feel like it's easier to get the pump in from the top. You just pull this e-brake cable out of the way a little bit, put a little bit of tension, and you can slide back in just that way. It's also a little bit easier to get the gasket lined up that way, in my opinion, too. Last little important tidbit, folks, is when you remove the old bolts, it's handy. This is our new pump. To have the new pump handy, or you can make a cardboard template, but if you've already got the pump, this is kind of easier way to go. 2 of these bolts are a little bit longer than the others. In this case, it's this bolt right here, and this bolt over here are both a little bit longer than the others. Here, we'll line 2 up side by side. They're just important to note because you want to make sure they get back to their proper location. So you just set them right in here as you remove them in order. Takes a few minutes extra, but makes it that much easier when you put it back together. So again, just in case you forget and don't know which way the long bolts go back in, they're right here. So not this bottom one, these 2 right here. Replacement water pump. I order the Gates units when replacing these kind of items, mainly because in this case, I've seen these OEM parts fail a lot. This part I just showed you is the OEM water pump, and I've seen these fail prematurely quite often. So in this case, I like to go with the aftermarket unit. Gates is a good trusted brand. I'll link to this specific one in the description. You can buy these on Amazon. They usually come in, well, it depends. If you got Prime, you can get the pump within 2 days, business days. They have some basic instructions that are pretty generic. I don't even recommend checking those out. So you can see the underside of the pump. Obviously exactly the same. The main difference between the OEM pump is the color of the impeller, but everything else is the same. Another nice thing about the Gates option is it comes with the gaskets. This is very important. You definitely do not want to reuse the old gaskets. They are pressed to fit. They're not intended to be reused. So as you can see, same setup pretty much. So this one, as I already showed you, doesn't want to rotate. This is how a new one should rotate, nice and easily, nice and freely. And that's pretty much it. Great quality pump. If you need to replace any of your belts, I recommend Gates as well. They just make a great product. I've always had really nice experience as far as them being identical in fit, form, and function. If you do go aftermarket, you definitely don't want to go with an off-brand. Gates is a good one. A lot of things I do like to go genuine OEM Porsche, but this is one I like to go with aftermarket, and I actually think this item is more reliable. So this is the one we're going to be installing. Another nice thing about this Gates item is if you do order it from Amazon and you're in a rush, say you need to get your car back on the road, you can literally get this in 1 day shipping. Depending on when you order it during the day, you get stuck on your way to work, you know it's the water pump, you might be able to get it tomorrow. So that's definitely a big deal for some of us. Personally, I always have a second use vehicle. Plus I'm married, so I can always make my wife angry and borrow her car. But if your Boxster or 911 is your primary vehicle, it's a great option to pay an extra $5, $6 if you're already a Prime member and get it 1 day shipping. So lastly, you need to check to make sure your water pump replacement doesn't leak. So the best way to do that is to have you guys watch while I do this on camera. Just fill a good bit up in the trunk. You don't have to fill it all the way just to check if you don't want, but it's a good idea to put in a good bit. Of course, you'll hear it drain down like so. And just wait, cross your fingers, and hope you don't see any drips. This might be super embarrassing if it starts dripping right now. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So now we're ready to get the belt back on, put the under trays back on, and set her down and fire her up. All right, so the last thing to do is just fire the car up, make sure we don't have any leaks. It's important to make sure this valve right here, anytime you open your coolant system and drain it, is in the up position. And basically you just leave this up for maybe a day or two. While you drive it around, it self-bleeds. It's a great system, much better than a lot of other mid-engine cars I've worked with in the past. And make sure you come in the trunk and check the level after you've driven it for a little bit. It's also best practice to turn the heat on to make sure the coolant circulates. And while you're doing this, while the coolant's self-bleeding, make sure you check and just check this coolant level periodically and watch your temperature gauge, but you should be good to go.